Hi everyone. Frank and I are so happy to have the chance to talk with all of you, and thanks for the opportunity to at least virtually be back in this beautiful venue speaking about all things space and careers. It's exciting to be here with Frank. I'll let him introduce himself in a moment, but Frank and I go way back to his days as a young graduate early in Australia. But yeah, Frank.
Thank you, Katherine. Hello everyone. Pleasure to be here. My name is Frank Gallagher. Katherine and I have worked together at the Australian Space Agency, and currently I'm a flight director on the European Space Agency's International Space Station Flight Control Team. So pleasure to be here and looking forward to the chat, Katherine.
Absolutely. So perhaps we can start with why each of us got into space. What pulled you in, Frank? No, I know you started as a different kind of engineer first. I would argue space is cooler. What drew you across?
Yeah, so I think early in my career, I had originally wanted to work in motorsport, so I had an automotive background. I think the draw of space, of course, being at the cutting edge of technology and human exploration, I think was the key thing. But I think originally I didn't really think that I could work in space. So one of the things that I think is amazing about a space career is that I think a lot of people don't really understand all the different backgrounds that you can have to get into space. And when I realised that it was an opportunity for me, that was when I pivoted towards a master's degree in space systems engineering and then working into the space industry. So that was kind of my pivot, but yeah, I think from your side, it was a bit of a different story, more of a from childhood. So I don't know if you could give us a bit more words about that.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, for me, it was always sort of space or bust. I always loved, looking up at the stars and wanted to go explore them like most kids do. About 7 out of 10 Aussie kids under the age of 12 want to be astronauts, which is phenomenal. And I think it just comes from, that childhood curiosity and desire for adventure. Many of us have the same reason you look under a rock or climb a tree, the same reason people have wanted to explore our world since humanity began, and also explore space. And as I grew up, I really wanted to be an astronaut, and so I set out to see what that would take. And I saw that to be an astronaut, you could have a career in pretty much any STEM field. It didn't have to be a space career. It could be in science and engineering and maths. You could be a pilot. You could be a doctor. You should be someone that likes expeditions, or, whether that's scientific expeditions or, other kinds of adventures. And you should have operational skills, live internationally, and all these things. And that all sounded pretty great. And I ended up studying physics and engineering at uni in Sydney because the engineering degree had the word space in the title, space engineering. And I didn't even really know what engineering was beyond the definition of the term. But I knew that it would build on my experience flying and the physics that I love so much. And while it was a slog at the beginning, I loved it by the end when you got to stop answering questions in the back of a textbook and actually got to be creative. But I realized at that point that I couldn't have the kind of career I wanted in Australia, which was to develop big, beautiful space missions, not at that time. And so I went overseas and studied a bit more, including at Cranfield University in the UK, and then cracked into the space sector after some internships at space agencies. Finally got my first job at Airbus Defence and Space in Stevenage, which was a wonderful adventure of living in the UK where my mother's family's from and having an international lifestyle like many of us have. But you kind of did it the other way around, Frank, right? You went from the UK to Australia and back
Yes, yeah, I
across
did.
the world.
I guess from a commonality standpoint, I think we both did a master's degree at Cranfield, and then first job at Airbus Defence and Space. So, although I was in Portsmouth, not Stevenage, but yeah, I guess I did it the other way around. From my standpoint, I got the job at Airbus Defence and Space in Stevenage, in Portsmouth, and then I'd saw the burgeoning space industry in Australia and the founding of the Australian Space Agency back in 2018. And I was really keen to come to Australia, and as a citizen myself with family out there, I really wanted to come out and be part of that growth of the industry there. So Yeah, I came across, and of course, we worked together there for a number of years, which was brilliant, and of course on the Moon to
Yeah.
Mars program and everything else. So it was a great experience, and of course, separately from that, I had a chance to work in private industry, which was where took my move over to satellite operations and working for a small company in Australia. And of course that sparked my love of, I guess, working in mission control, working in operations, which has led me to where I am now, in human spaceflight, working with astronauts such as yourself on the International Space Station.
It'd be wonderful to hear you on the voice loops from space one time, Frank. That would be quite the full circle. It'd be amazing. Do you find that living internationally really like changed the way that you were an engineer? Did it bring you anything different, you think, than people that don't have that opportunity?
I think so. I think, I mean, as you know, the space industry is a global one, and I think uh, work between countries is something that happens from the smaller satellite missions all the way up to something like the ISS. And you get to learn different cultures, different ways of working that you're maybe not familiar with, and then you can then bring that back to your home country. And I think employers will see you as it's a very valuable skill to have, a very valuable piece of experience to have, that you've worked with other cultures, other people, other organisations, large and small, and I think, from just to pivot from that point, is it something that you feel was very useful for your journey to becoming an astronaut?
I think so. So for me, I got to live and work as a space engineer in 6 countries, some of them multiple times. Germany, I've lived there 3 or 4 times, depending on how you count it, for example. And I found that working in an international environment from a project basis as well as from a life basis really made me see that there's lots of different kinds of engineers, lots of ways to culturally come to solutions. And in fact, in the astronaut selection, something that the degree of which its importance to me was unexpected was how much international experience mattered in the selection and in your ability to get through the training. Like things like, looking through words of what people say to their intent and being generous in, interpreting what people say with an optimism bias. Understanding, the way people give feedback is different, the way people act is different. And that doesn't mean you stereotype different cultures, but it makes you see that there's a spectrum of ways to get things done, and you can take the best and worst of different things. I know I've had to effectively mediate between, people that may be Dutch and Japanese in a project where one's extremely direct and the other's extremely indirect, but you all have the same united purpose and passion, and with the right experiences internationally and interculturally, you can get through that. And in space, as you all know, Frank, you're, a team of astronauts from a team of nations, each with a huge ecosystem on the ground, all working together as well. So that's a huge part of it. But
Yeah,
yeah, for
for
me,
sure.
like I think that there are a few things that were really wonderful about a space career. For me, I got to, launch payloads on high altitude balloons and witness rockets be launched from above the polar circle in Sweden. When I worked in the UK, I got to work on, Lisa Pathfinder, a gravity wave mission, an Earth observation mission, and later in Germany on human spaceflight vehicles and platforms and robotic missions. And, I was having such an amazing time doing that. I learned so much from the people around me. And it was when the Australian Space Agency set up that I was attracted home. And, to do something greater than I ever thought I'd be able to do as a space engineer, which was to help not just develop a piece of technology or a mission, which was thrilling to do, but actually to help grow a whole space sector. And now, as an astronaut, I see being an astronaut is bigger than the space sector. It's for many kinds of researchers, as well as raising the aspirations of the public as well. So yeah, it's been a really interesting journey, I would say. But Frank, you've just qualified not too long ago, what, almost a year ago now, as a flight director, which is amazing. What has surprised you on that, and what are you excited for about the future?
I think for what I'm excited about. So yes, I certified reasonably recently, which was following 7 months of reasonably intense training simulations where we were training for things like emergencies on the International Space Station. Those included trainings with JAXA, NASA, and the Payload Operations Center in Huntsville. So, of course, that's one of the reasons where that international working with different people, different ways of working really comes into, the way that ESA does things is very different to the way that NASA does things and the way that JAXA does things. And that really comes out in those simulations. As part of that training, I was lucky enough to be able to go to the astronaut center in Cologne where you trained, and did a bit of training there, and also in Houston, Texas with NASA, working with astronauts there and crew trainers to understand a bit more of what life on the station is like. But things that I'm excited for in the future for human spaceflight, it's really becoming very exciting at the moment. We've got the moon and lunar exploration to look forward to. The Artemis missions following the next few years with the Lunar Gateway as well, and of course there's still a few years left of ISS, and then what low Earth orbit human exploration looks like. So I think from my perspective, I'm very looking forward to being in the space that allows me to work on those projects. And what about you, Catherine? What excites you about the future?
Oh, I mean, it's such an exciting time to be an astronaut, especially a rookie astronaut. Like graduating from astronaut training is really just the beginning of whatever may lie ahead. As you say, the International Space Station, this big, beautiful facility that is almost the size of a soccer field, 109 meters across, with the internal volume of like the passenger part of an A380. Just filled with science facilities, that's going to retire so that people can go forward to the moon and also explore low Earth orbit in a more commercial way. So there's going to be, in a not very optimistic scenario, but lots of different destinations for astronauts, lots of kind of work to do, and yeah, whether contributing to those from the ground or in space as an astronaut, it's incredible. We're going back to the moon not to repeat what we did before, but go to a different part of the moon, the South Polar region, where we can stay longer because it's light for longer. You don't have the 2 weeks daylight and 2 weeks darkness, and in the valleys where it's always dark. It's the coldest part of the solar system, and that pushes everything we have. It pushes our engineering. It'll push our understanding of the universe and how the Earth formed, and also help to do things like refine geothermal inputs into climate models. So yeah, for me, just looking to contribute to that endeavor, and to the kind of science you can do in space, like medical research. The amount of science you can do up there, especially in medical research, blew me away on the training. Is exciting. In my immediate future, I'm focusing right now on getting out across Australia and opening doors for researchers to have more access and awareness of human spaceflight, as well as different businesses that could enter into supply chain gaps and offer engineering solutions, for example. And this year, in the last couple of months, I've been speaking to a lot of kids, particularly in remote and regional areas, to try and uplift their aspirations, whatever they may be, whether it's space or STEM or something else altogether, just to teach them to back themselves, I hope. But yeah, it's pretty exciting, and being an astronaut, just like being a flight director, there's always an element of international living, even if you're not zooming around the Earth every 90 minutes. Training is, in the US, it's in Japan, it can be in Russia, it's in Europe and Canada. So yeah, I expect a lot more of that in my future. And one of the learnings I guess I took forward from living abroad, when I was in the UK and across Europe before, was, how important having hobbies is when you live abroad. Like sports, particularly for me, were a way that was easy to make friends, as opposed to not having that vector. And in space as well, astronauts do a lot of sport to relax and have team bonding. Yeah. But
Yeah, of course.
so I guess like,
No, you go ahead.
oh, I was just going to say, yeah. So in terms of, tips for young engineers living abroad, I'd say keep embracing your hobbies as a way to meet people. Um, you know, be proud of your culture and share it with others, and do things like have coffee breaks. to learn from people that you have coffee breaks with, have lunch breaks at the astronaut center. We always took lunch breaks and we would have breaks with other astronauts and our colleagues, and it was a really good way to learn from each other and build that important team bonding. And that's something that in the middle of my career I let go to work a bit harder, and I saw how valuable that is, especially when you're new.
Yeah, for sure. I think for myself at the moment, being based in Munich, I'm really enjoying the proximity to the Alps and being able to do things that I couldn't do perhaps in where I was in Australia and where I was in the UK. Being able to go skiing with the people you work with is quite fun, and the fact that you can sort of do that and be back in your own bed, I think being able to take advantage of the hobbies and things that you might not be able to do maybe back home is a really valuable one. But yeah, I fully agree. Taking hobbies, taking some time for yourself is also really important. Making sure that you feel comfortable where you are as well, and that there is some other you need to get other value from where you are other than just, it can't just all be about work. As much as the area that we work in is exciting, it needs to be that balance, and making sure that you have time for your hobbies, time to explore new things, and to get to know people around you, and be familiar with the people you live around and live with. I don't want to rush things, but I wanted to move on to. I wondered if there was anything that you hope today that the audience might take away from this conversation, Katherine.
Gosh, I guess for me, I would say to the people in the audience, if you are, you know, interested in space as a career, whatever your career is, whether you're an engineer or otherwise, that it's a really exciting time to work in space, and we need all kinds of thinkers and all kinds of doers to help prepare for the future of space activities. You know, space critically underpins our lives today in a way that many people don't know about. Across Australia, about a year ago, a whole load of farmers couldn't work for more than a day because there was a failure in one single satellite system that affected all the GPS enabled tractors that use that system. And it wasn't a failure that anyone expected to be a vulnerability in the industry. People just didn't understand space enough to see how critically we rely on it. You know, space ultimately is just a place. It's an eye in the sky from where we can see phenomena around the world. So it's been used to track refugees so we can do food drops better, to identify modern slavery, to identify fires, and to help manage remote industries. And from what you can see from that eye in the sky, you can connect. And what you can connect, you can inform. So like every time you tap your phone to pay for something, you're using space technology. And beyond that, you know, human spaceflight, which is often thought of as perhaps the most niche, or dare say even luxurious part of space, actually is really critical for scientific research as well as economic opportunity, in ways that I didn't realize at the time I started my astronaut training. I knew it in the shallow but not in the depth, because in space, when you have the gravity vector removed, you're not under 1G of gravity anymore, and you're exposed to radiation in an isolated, confined, remote environment, phenomena change, right? So crystals grow larger and more pure, things mix differently. You don't have heat flow based convection, only forced convection. And that means we can do amazing research into new medicines, into mixing of new things like concrete, into antimicrobial devices, and the list goes on and on. And so being able to do that unique science in space is unlocking a lot on Earth too. So yeah, for those that are purpose driven, space is absolutely an opportunity to work in. And for those of you that are working internationally, in other areas, know that working internationally is good for you as a whole person as well as your career, despite the challenges. I think I would never change that. What about you, Frank?
Yeah, I mean that's a good one. But I think to expand on it, I think my key thing would just be that I really think that that people from different engineering backgrounds shouldn't be disheartened on potentially working in the space industry. I think that the number of different engineers from different backgrounds that the space industry needs to grow. That's both in the development of satellite technology, but also in areas like human spaceflight. I think I was as a young engineer astonished at the different backgrounds that were seen as I hadn't thought were needed in the space industry. So I think just as a small add-on from what you said there, Catherine, is just that, if there are people who might be listening to this today who think, oh, I'd like to work in the space industry, potentially in human spaceflight or in satellite systems engineering, that they can come from the space industry needs people from all sorts of different backgrounds, and that you don't need to have studied something as niche as space systems engineering at university to be able to have a career in this amazing industry.
Yeah, I remember when I was at Airbus in Stevenage in the thermal team, we hired someone from a biscuit factory. He brought such good ideas, like a thermal engineer making biscuits, right? And I've heard of people from a story of someone from SeaWorld being hired into SpaceX, right? Because they knew how to use valves and in a really creative way and build those kinds of systems. Um, Maybe if we pivot back a little bit, I had another question for you, Frank, which was in your career journey, you've had quite a few fantastic leaps forward. I'd be interested to ask you about like your key decision points in your career, and any tips based on that you might have for young engineers in the audience today. Maybe
Yeah,
tell
I
us
know.
what
I think
those
it's
big leaps were.
yeah, sure. So I think big leaps for me. So I was initially a satellite operations engineer in a company in Australia, and I moved from I guess being an individual engineer to becoming team lead and a flight director there, where I was suddenly in charge of a group of people and had to think about, oh, we need to hire people and we need to train people and new team members. And I think the key decision that I had to make there, and it's something that I tend to use as a rule in every aspect of my career, and sometimes I regret that I have it as a strict rule, which is that if I'm presented an opportunity and it's terrifying to me, that I should do it. And I always find myself
Yeah,
sitting in
I
a
like that.
meeting and something gets brought up, and it's a potential new opportunity. Is there a volunteer who would like to do this? And if the idea of doing that thing terrifies me and makes me think, oh, great, every day at work I'm going to be anxious about this thing that's coming up, this presentation I need to give, or this project that I need to deliver, that means that's my sort of lizard brain saying that you need to take that opportunity, you need to do that, because it's going to open up so many different things. And I mean, that's pretty much, I feel, how I've gone from where I was in that small company to where I am today. And I still follow that rule every day, sometimes regretting that I choose to do that, but it always tends to lead to more opportunities and better things. And yeah, I'm wondering if you have a similar rule or something similar that you feel like decision making wise that
Yeah.
has led you to where you are.
Not overtly, but I love that concept of if you're a bit afraid of it, maybe it's a good thing. I'm always a fan of pushing yourself outside your comfort zone, of taking on tasks that seem a bit out of reach, because I think we're all capable of more than we imagine ourselves to be. And I've always believed that everything is a product of talent, time, and effort, right? And effort is the most important. The other two things just make it faster or more efficient. So if you're really purpose driven and love something and you're willing to work at it, you can get there. And, for me, when I was first got to work on like the analysis of part of a space mission, and then like a component, and then a subsystem, and then a mission, and then an industry, and now be an astronaut, each one of those things, I was like, I've made it. And I was like, oh, there's more to do. And, you just keep going and going. And I remember early in my career being quite intimidated when I felt like I was very far from being the smartest in the room. If I was the least experienced in the room, and the most unsure. And the more experienced I've got as an engineer, the more willing I am to ask the potentially silly question, because I have no shame in it, because my goal is now to understand. If you hide the question, you don't progress. And on astronaut training in the classroom, there were usually six of us as students. You needed to understand, so you just ask a silly question, right? Even if there's cameras in there, you need to get the knowledge. And so to do that, you need to really quickly build that psychological safety in your team, to progress that. But yeah, for
Yeah.
me, I mean, I think that obviously I've had like a few stage changes, the biggest one being from space engineer to astronaut. But I'm lucky that the space part of my career continues. And when you're between big training blocks, you pretty much use your experience from your original day job as an engine as an astronaut, to keep moving forward. And on the astronaut training, we learned so much. We learned a lot about science, because we're scientists in the sky, the hands, the eyes, the ears of scientists on the ground. We're medical guinea pigs. So we learn how to do medical tests on each other and others. We did all the expeditions like winter survival, ocean survival. We went in parabolic flight vomit comets and zero-G planes. We did like scuba diving to learn how to do the first learnings about spacewalks in simulators to fly the robotic arm. We even had to learn a foreign language and space history and policy. It was really wonderful because, I love learning and I love ideas, and this was just a great way to do that as part of a great team atmosphere. And to do that for the first time representing Australia makes me so excited. Now I've come home to use that knowledge to try and unlock the ability for more Australians to be involved in human space flight. You're already there, but we need more of us. And, maybe one day even more Australian astronauts, because imagine what that would do for our country.
100%. I wanted to just latch on to one thing you said there about asking silly questions as well. I think it's a really important one. There's a thing that goes in the at least the ESA flight control team, regarding flight directors, and it's not meant as an insult. It's meant it's the flight director is always considered to have the least knowledge in the room. So the whole point of the job is to ask the silly questions. You are the one who has nothing but a notebook and a timeline, and you need to ask those silly questions. So yeah, I just wanted to point back on that one, because it's certainly a really valuable point, and I think it stems obviously much wider than just the flight director role, across all aspects of the space industry. But yeah, it's funny that you say that, because I mean it's a huge part of my job is to not think that it's the silly question, and to ask those questions, even if it might make me feel like I'm missing something big.
Yeah, and what's the biggest challenge you think you faced?
I think biggest
Anything that,
challenge I think was, that's a really difficult one. I think biggest challenge is just always is stepping into. I mean, my background was not in human spaceflight coming into this, so I think coming into the flight control team of the International Space Station with ESA, as a flight director and being expected to lead the team, was quite daunting. In my previous role, I'd gone from team member to team lead, whereas here I was jumping in as a team lead. So you have to kind of earn the respect and trust of the people around you reasonably quickly, and to prove that you're capable of that leadership and being able to make decisions in such a high paced and stressful environment. So I think a lot of what we've already spoken about today is what essentially I've had to use to feel comfortable in that environment. So, getting to know people outside of work, so I feel comfortable around them, they feel comfortable around me, they know me, they know what I'm like. And then also, again, not being afraid to ask those silly questions, even if I think that I'm going to look like I don't know what I'm doing, ask those questions, because it's important. There are very complicated and expensive systems and human lives at stake when we make these decisions. So I would much rather ask that silly question than potentially risk something bad happening. But from coming across from Australia to the European Astronaut Centre, for you, Catherine, as an astronaut candidate, what were the challenges that you faced with that and the early parts of your training?
For me, I only had like a few weeks notice that I was actually going to be an astronaut before I started training there. So my head was absolutely spinning. And, I arrived at the European Astronaut Centre, which is near Cologne, on the first day, and they had all of our class time to arrive together. And when we entered the big entrance hall, we had, up on the screen next to this huge ISS, International Space Station model, it said "Welcome home." And it kind of felt like that because I'd been away from Europe, 4 years, and I was coming back to not the same place that was my home, but to part of my former life, and that was the European space industry. And waiting for us as we walked through the doors in that entrance hall was so many of the ESA, the European Space Agency, existing astronauts and retired astronauts. And it was really kind of overwhelming because they are, astronauts that I had looked up to for my whole career. I'd read a lot of their biographies, and they were welcoming us as peers. And it was like, okay, our life is changing now. Like you could see that shift starting to occur, but quickly enough, you're so busy, you barely have time to step back and take a breath and reflect. So, just the logistics of moving country were tough with two kids and a husband, but hats off to my husband. He took on the hard stuff there. But for me, I think it was hard to pace myself. We had over 300 instructors in the 13 months we were trained, and every one of them was an expert in their field and would hunt down the answer to any question you had. And they'd put in, hundreds of hours for each of their lessons, so they were spectacular. And you just have to sometimes just stop and keep energy for the next class and not go down every rabbit hole, not do everything to perfection because eventually you won't be able to keep that up. And it's really good practice for being in space, which missions are usually 6 months now, meaning that, it's a marathon, not a sprint. So having those self-care principles, which is one of the principles we learn about in the human behavior and performance module we have, which I think is similar to the ops team, where you look at, there's an International Space Station human behavior and performance model. You can Google one of the old versions, it's good reading. And that takes you through things like self-care, which for me is something that at times in my career I have not respected. I'm sure a lot of us have burnt the candle at both ends a lot, but, it's important that you rest enough to work well, not work hard enough to deserve a rest. Because in space, if you mess up at the wrong time because you're tired at a time when it's not optimal to be tired and you might not know when that is, then there are big consequences. So, yeah, that was something that I had to learn. And on top of that, learning Russian, that was hard. I'm not a language person, and I had to put in a lot of extra effort from day one on that. And I was so happy when I got through it. And I was like, great, I might actually pass this thing now. I've got through that module. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I was wondering if are there any skills or trainings that you had as part of the wide breadth of knowledge that you're given as an astronaut in training? Was there anything that surprised you that was part of the training course that you didn't anticipate?
Honestly, not really, because I studied so much in the selection what I was going to be expecting. I'd like speed read every biography I could find to understand what I'd be in for. Um, but what did surprise me in a really positive way was how in the European Space Agency astronaut training, we were not competitive at all, not even in personality. So we were, informed really early in the training, like your flights are not competing against each other. The decisions are made are multifactorial. It's not, if you get through the training, you've all got every chance to progress well. So back each other through the training. You'll each have different strengths and weaknesses. We all came from totally different backgrounds. The two of us were engineers, one more aero with a bit of space, myself space. There was an astrophysicist, a neuroscientist, a helicopter test pilot, and a doctor. And we all had multiple kind of second level careers as well. And how can you compare? yourself in medical training to someone that's a doctor. You can't compare. So you just help each other out and get along with it. And so that camaraderie we had was fantastic. And that's not something that I had expected. I thought it would be fun but competitive. And so yeah, that was one of the best parts of it, was going through it together and now cheering each other on. Two of my class have already been assigned missions, which is awesome, and we're also excited for them. And I look forward to seeing the others go up to. So three big takeaways for all of you in the audience. First of all, like dream big for yourself, whatever your dreams may be, like for yourself, your community, your world. And as you do that, you know, do it because you love the journey, not just the destination, and write your own story on your way there. There's many ways to get to a goal, that you have dreams that become goals that become actions, and so just pursue that without hesitation if you think it's something worth doing. I'd also say keep going to networking events like this one, building an understanding of what's happening within a broader network as well as people in your workplace is a way to see opportunities and solutions to problems that you might not have realized existed. Um, yeah, would be my two main points. You, Frank?
Yeah, I think from my side, it's just to reflect on some of the things we've said. It's I'd like people to ask the silly questions, always ask the silly questions, and my second point is just that do things that scare you. I think that's the key thing from my side. Do things that put you out of your comfort zone, that do make you a little bit scared, because they're the things that lead to fascinating opportunities. And yeah, from my side, I hope you all enjoyed tonight's event, and it's been a pleasure speaking with you, Katherine, and being able to speak to all these engineers here tonight.
Yeah, it was great to see you again, albeit virtually, Frank, and I look forward to speaking to you, hopefully in a mission control or even one day from space.
Absolutely, looking forward to hear you on Space to Ground.